This is the burning issue on the happy world of 5FM radio, bringing you hot, smoldering topics on a weekly basis. Your participation is important.
Good morning and welcome to yet another edition of the burning issue. Remember, this is the Thursday edition, and we are grateful that you found time to tune in. We are live on 5FM radio on 89.9 in Lusaka and the surrounding areas. And remember, we are also live on our partner radio stations, and we keep thanking them for carrying this program live on their platforms. And our partner radio stations are Tuta FM radio on 97.7 in Luapula, precisely in Mansa, but covering the entire Luapula province. And thank you very much for that. And we are also live on Muchinga Radio, in Chinsali to be precise, on 88.1, covering the rest of Muchinga province. Live also on the Copper Belt in Chingola, that's where iWave FM radio is, and 90.1 FM. And of course, covering the rest of the Copper Belt. Central Province is well catered for. We are live on Spice FM on 91.1 in Kawe and covering the rest of Central Province. And Southern Province is also covered. We are live on Wave FM radio on 98.7 in Mazabuka. And live also on our online platforms. We are live on 5FM Radio Zambia Facebook page. Look out for that. We are also live on Ubuntu channel. That Facebook page and the following Facebook pages are carrying this program live as well. Grindstone TV, Patriotic Front page, Smart Eagles, Citizens First, and Zambian Post. All these are Facebook pages that are carrying this program live. Please leave us a comment and or a question for our guest. Later on in the course of the program, I'll give you, our listeners, an opportunity to call in and interact with our guest. Now, today, our guest is Honourable Brian Mundubile. He is Member of Parliament representing Mporokoso Constituency. And I'm your host, Zachariah Banda. Now, Honourable, always a pleasure to have you. Welcome to the burning issue.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Zach. And indeed, it's good morning to all the listeners. Kuli mwewonse mwevale umfandeti mwashuken bomkwai abanensu kushipata ndeti mwauka bwanji bamunina ne pamonza pandeti mwauka uti and yes, we are very happy to be hosted this morning, Zach, and it's been a long time.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I was also surprised in the introduction you neglected, willfully to mention that you were hosting the leader of opposition in Parliament. You're being very careful.
I'm being very careful here, but we'll get to there because I was yet to get your status on that here. But first things first. I mean, how are the people of Mporokoso doing?
Well, the people of Mporokoso are doing very well.
Right.
Of course, they are equally facing challenges other people in the country are facing.
Right.
The economic situation is just as bad. Yeah. And the cost of living.
Have you done well with agriculture in Mporokoso? How is the situation like agriculture-wise?
Well, agriculture-wise, well, of course, we had a very good rain pattern.
Okay.
Basically, the entire northern province.
Yeah.
That's why you heard like that. We had some complaints that I think if the Ministry of Agriculture had done their planning properly,
right,
they would have actually doubled or quadrupled the allocation of inputs to that part of the country. Then even with this drought that we're experiencing, we would have had a normal yield. We would have produced more in that part of the country, knowing very well that other parts of the country are experiencing drought. Yeah, so Muchinga, Northern Luapula, and the other parts of the country experienced above normal rainfall.
Yeah.
Meaning that if the statement that was laid on the floor of the House by the Minister of Environment sometime in October was taken seriously by the Minister of Agriculture, because he warned that we're going to experience drought in certain parts of the country. So what we expected was that when the Minister of Agriculture was doing the allocations, they should have actually doubled or quadrupled the allocation in that part of the country.
Yeah.
As a deliberate measure. What would have done then, we would have produced more to compensate for the
drought-stricken areas
in the other areas.
Yeah.
But what we had instead was the Minister of Agriculture came on the floor of the House to announce that they had doubled the allocation of farming inputs to the parts of the country that were going to experience drought. And the Bangolu Member of Parliament, Anthony Kasandre, asked to say what wisdom was employed in that decision, seeing that we were told here that there will be no rain in this part of the country. Of course, the minister would not answer. Yeah.
But the people of Mporokoso, I would like to understand how they feel. The fact that their representative in a member of parliament, yourself, has been expelled for 30 days. What does that do to the people of a constituency when their member of parliament has been expelled from parliament?
Yeah, and I think this is a bone of contention. The question that you ask is whether the people of Mporokoso should be punished as a result of their member of parliament having allegedly misconducted himself.
Precisely.
Yeah. What have they done to deserve this punishment of not having a representative in the House for that long? This is a weakness that we see in the parliamentary system. Ordinarily, there should be no reason why a member of parliament should be suspended from attending parliament. Because remember, he is there as a representative, representing people from his constituency. So if the alleged misconduct is on the part of that individual, the punishment should be such that he should deprive that individual of some benefit, not the people that he's representing. Yeah. So, well, to answer your question, I'm just trying to highlight some of the weaknesses in parliamentary systems.
Yeah. And just for correcting myself, I think I used the word expelled, but I think the word is suspended.
Yeah.
Right. So today I want us to talk, because you've been leader of opposition in parliament for quite some time, and you're a seasoned parliamentarian. And I would like us to discuss really a lot around parliament, right? I have noticed with time that, for example, I'll pick out one committee, Parliamentary Accounts Committee. In the past, I mean, I think we had one of the strongest. This was a committee that was strong under the leadership of Howard Kunda, for example, under the chairmanship of Mr. Mwale, Vincent Mwale at the time. And it's different now. It's so quiet. It's not as vibrant as the two I've mentioned. What really is going on? Because I know the importance of Public Accounts Committee. It's very key in as far as keeping account, or indeed checking how people in administration are doing. What really has gone wrong with that committee? What could have happened to it?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Zach. Yes, you are referring to the Public Accounts Committee. Of course, the maybe two other, accountability committees. There is a committee on parastatals.
Okay.
There's government assurances, and I think a committee on local government. There should be about 4.
Right.
Yeah. So these are accountability committees. Committees that should put government to test. They should put in checks and balances. So the moment the committee system or the selection of these committees is compromised, then you have a problem. In other jurisdictions, for instance, the Public Accounts Committee cannot be headed by an independent member of parliament. It has to be headed by a member from the largest opposition, because of the stakes that they have.
Okay.
Today, the Public Accounts Committee is headed by an independent member of parliament, Warren Mambazi.
Yes.
When you look at the other committees, and how the selection of the members has been
Who
done.
selects the members?
Ordinarily, in the other parliament, I served as government chief whip.
Yes.
As a chief whip, the whips of parties recommend members to committees. That is how it's supposed to be.
Okay.
And the Standing Orders Committee, finalizes the appointments. One or two changes can be made based on what the committee feels.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I want to say this, Zach. Let's go back to political parties.
Right.
When political parties are adopting their members, they are picking members that will be effective in the constituency and also effective in parliament. So as a political party, you're very deliberate. You want to select a mix. There must be a skill set, because you are going into parliament with the hope that you're going to govern. So the individuals that you select at adoption stage should be that if you're going to be in government, you already are placing who's likely to be minister and so on. So in any case, in parliament, you want to ensure that you have individuals who are going to be effective in committees. We have a situation today, something that I didn't agree with even before I was removed from the Standing Orders Committee, where you get, we were not involved, for instance. We're not involved in placing individuals in these committees. And when you go to a committee, you find that George Sanga, a seasoned lawyer at the bar for 30 years, you don't put him in the legal committee, you put him in the committee on sports. Hello? Okay.
Is that the situation?
Of course. Mutotweka Fire goes to gender. Okay. This is a chartered accountant. Kalalwe Mukosa, chartered accountant thrown around. Gordon Mwila, chartered accountant taken to sport. You find that the lawyers that we have in our party are nowhere near the legal committee. The accountants are nowhere near the accountability committees. So from there, you begin to see the direction that Parliament is taking. One, the dilution of the committee system. Now remember that the functions of Parliament, the roles of Parliament, you talk about representation, you talk about legislation, checks and balances and oversight and budgeting. These are core functions of Parliament.
Yeah.
And these functions are carried out through committees. Now, the moment the committees are diluted, meaning that there will be no effective checks and balances, because you want your public accounts committee to have these chartered accountants sitting in there. They're going to ask the difficult questions so that government is kept in check. Now, if you dilute the committee system, then we'll get to a position where you begin to observe, like many other ordinary Zambians, and ask these difficult questions. Yeah, so we have concerns, because many people know about Parliament. They know about the plenary session, the open session. But there's a lot of work that goes in the background. And the strength of any parliament is committee system. So if you want to compromise Parliament, you start by compromising the committee system. Yeah, I want to confirm that up to the time I left the committee, I did not agree with the manner in which the committees were being selected. Ordinarily, whips of parties should be allowed to recommend members to committees, and the Standing Orders Committee just because I know my members.
So in this selection of committees, whips were not involved.
No, they were not involved. They were just meant to rubber stamp. And when they raised issues, they were not sustained. Yeah, so it's a real problem. I want to say this. This is a real problem, because if as leaders we begin to sweep debt under the carpet, then we have a real problem. What you are seeing, the weaknesses you're observing at PAC are in every committee. In jurisdictions that we visited, you don't have members of the ruling party chairing accountability committees. You don't. Because how do they provide checks and balances against themselves?
Yeah.
You understand?
Is that the situation?
That's what is obtaining at Parliament today. It's a very sad story, really, and everybody's trying to play safe. Remember I said, Zach, I said, I'll stand out to sacrifice. If it means what I will say here will earn me another suspension, I am ready. Because what I want us to do is to do the right thing. Okay, if there's debt that is going on, we'll expose it for what it is. So that for once as Zambians, let's learn to stand up and, say it as it is. Parliament plays a key role in the governance of a country. Now, if those of us that were entrusted with the responsibility, with the role to represent the people, are going to sit there and shy out and say, no, because if I say this, I may be sent out of the house. I mean, no. I'll stand out. A wrong is a wrong.
Would you like to share with the public the reasons why you've been suspended, why you are serving the 30-day suspension?
Well, of course, I think you saw we had an altercation with the speaker. The speaker was clearly not impartial in the manner that he was, conducting affairs of the House. Now, because of the decorum and the respect that you'll have for presiding officers, I tactfully, wanted to rise using a standing order that talks about the role of the leader of opposition, and that is to maintain decorum in the House. I was going to tactfully guide the House without ideally exposing the presiding officer. But even then, he wouldn't even give me a chance to speak. If you saw the clip, he rudely interrupted me and would not even allow me to raise a point of order. What was most disturbing was that the very previous day, a member of parliament for Kanyama rose on the same point of order, and he was allowed by the same speaker. So obviously, at that point, I thought it was important to put it on record that I didn't agree with what you're saying, and I knew that that would earn me some punishment, and I was very quick to mention that I was ready to face the consequences, but I had to point out that for as long as he did not give chance to my members of parliament on the left to speak, then we were going to have a problem. So that is the reason why I was suspended. Now, I was suspended for doing the right thing. Maybe, if you wanted to know.
Yeah. Let's get to the economy where we are. How does Parliament contribute to the well-being of the economy, if at all it does? And if it does, then why are we where we are economically? First, make us understand, first of all, why I'm asking you this is because a concerned parliamentarian echoed to me that the mielie meal shortage, for example, and the reason it's expensive as a result of the shortages should have been prevented, but it should have been prevented at parliamentary level. How so? How could that have been done?
Yes, Zach. First of all, we have what we're calling a constitutional democracy, meaning that the Constitution is at the center of our governance. It's the one that distributes power to Parliament, distributes power to the executive, power to the judiciary. And the Constitution ideally is there to impose rules on rulers. Okay? The same Constitution provides for what you call constitutional safeguards and watchdogs. These are all measures where you want to ensure to say the elite, the few people that are the ruling class, do not have it easy at the expense of the majority. So the Constitution ideally reduces, it would reduce the elite to mere delegates on behalf of the people. This is the background that I'm setting.
Right.
Because what you have the Constitution on one hand, then you have constitutionalism on the other. It's possible to have a constitution and not to have constitutionalism, because constitutionalism will refer to the culture or the implementation of those constitutional provisions.
Right.
Okay. So, when you have Parliament and how Parliament will help in checking government or the executive activity.
Yeah.
We are there to, first of all, provide checks and balances. So let's take cost of living, for instance, or the high cost of meal, for instance.
Right.
You have Ministry of Agriculture. The members of Parliament pose questions. We understand, Honourable Minister, we understand that you're exporting maize. How safe are we as a country, for you to start exporting maize? At that point, maybe because the debate is heated, the Speaker would order that the minister comes with a ministerial statement.
Right.
So when he comes with a ministerial statement to explain why they're exporting maize, members of Parliament have a take on that ministerial statement by asking questions. And maybe arising from that, one member can go and raise a motion, a substantive motion where they say government should stop exporting maize. So when Parliament is functioning properly, if Parliament, in this particular case, had considered the concerns of members of Parliament, because there were a number of concerns, there was a question every day on the export of maize, literally every day. And as members of Parliament, we took it very seriously. Those of us that had been in the previous government, we knew why we had the 1.5 million tons of maize in stock. Earlier, in around 2015, we had experienced some drought. And the predictions were that in the times ahead would experience periodical droughts. So the PF government decided to start stockpiling maize so that in times of difficulty, like now, we'll rely on that maize. So we therefore did not support the idea of export of maize. So that is why you saw us coming up on the floor, asking the difficult questions. Unfortunately, most of the members were either gagged. The minister was protected by presiding officers. No, the minister has already answered. What the minister says is right. He has said what he knows that is correct. So our aim at that time was exert pressure, excessive pressure on the minister so that he stopped exporting maize. But because he was protected by presiding officers and members of Parliament were gagged, the export of maize continued. And what we have today is this problem. So I agree with the person that had called you. We as Parliament could have stopped the export of maize. And had we stopped the export of maize, today we would not be facing high meal prices. So yes, again, I agree. I want to admit as a member of Parliament that it was failure on the part of Parliament to take up its rightful role, to save the people of Zambia once again by stopping that export, the reckless, the insensitive measure or move to export maize when would need it not very long from that time.
Maize is just one of the components that Parliament could have really exhausted on it. But then, what other critical areas do you feel that we are where we are because the Parliament was not given an opportunity to have a say, especially in terms of the opposition, have a say on?
You talk about the shortage of drugs. We raised issues on the floor of the House concerning the sudden change of suppliers of medicines. Our humble understanding was that the suppliers of pharmaceuticals had been there from time immemorial, maybe the UNIP times, because these are big international companies. So governments come and go because of the nature and the sensitivity around supply of medicines. So when the EPND government came, they decided to change, cancel contract and bring in. So we raised issues on this. And again, there was a fight on the floor of the House. As usual, members of Parliament were gagged. Ministers were protected. The result has been, this is 2.5 years plus. The stories of shortages of drugs are still there. We hear this every day. So it's again another sad story that, had Parliament been given a chance, we would have, ensured that, yes, in as much as the government would have wanted to bring in new suppliers, but they would have done it in such a phased manner that it doesn't affect the supply of drugs to health facilities. Yeah, so there's been issues, for instance, the appointment of Auditor General. We have issues to talk about to do with the appointment of private auditors to audit security wings. We have had the procurement, public procurement under Ministry of Agriculture. You've had issues and the dual carriageway, the Mopani now, the transfer of shares, from ZCMH to First Quantum. You had issues to do with the deposit slip, the 65 million that disappeared in thin air, where ministers struggled, to justify where the money was deposited. Yeah, of course, the input distribution. Yeah, so Parliament is a very important institution, Zach, and that parliamentary business must be taken seriously. That is why the rule is that parliamentary business takes precedence. It's because of the important place that it occupies in our governance system. Now, I was just giving you an example. on the input distribution, for instance. The Minister of Environment comes on the floor of the House to tell us that they will be experiencing drought in certain parts of the country. And the Minister of Agriculture a month later comes to tell us that he's actually doubling the input allocation to the parts that will be experienced or be most hit by the same drought. Now, these two individuals are coming from the same government. We want to in the government that I served, they would sit in the same cabinet. I don't know what happens now, but they would sit in the same cabinet. So programs such as this normally came from we had what we called an integrated multi-sectoral approach. This is where you worked in clusters, such that when you're delivering development, whether it's agriculture, whether it's infrastructure, you worked in clusters. It was a multidisciplinary setup. You have more than one ministry. So the Minister of Environment and Minister of Agriculture, ideally, we expect them to work together. Minister of Water to work together. Yeah, but in this particular case, we started asking the difficult questions. Why are you taking inputs to the southern part of the country, yet you know that there'll be no rain? And the minister will come up and say, no, previously the people in that region were marginalized. So this is the reason why we are doing what we are doing. So the point there, Zach, is you understand, yes, we have a drought, but you must interrogate matters beyond that. The question that begs is that even with this drought, had we done things differently, were we going to be better off? And the answer is yes. So what transpired was that there wasn't enough time on the floor of the House allocated to this very important subject, because then we should have persuaded the minister. We should have persuaded, had we been given enough time, persuaded the minister to say, why don't you increase the input allocation to the parts of the country where you know that there will have no more rainfall, and reduce the allocation to the parts where you know that the input will just be wasted. Yeah, so these matters were glossed over, and today we're where we are.
You, on the list, you did bring out the Mopani issue, which is quite fresh in people's minds. And there's a debate around whether the equity partner that was found and handed the mine to them for obviously management purposes. The argument from your end is that should have come through Parliament. The argument on the other side is that it shouldn't have come through Parliament because this was not a sale. All right. So if it were a sale, then it could have come through Parliament. Let's first of all understand your argument.
Yes, our argument comes from Article 210 and specifically 210 Article 2. It says a major state asset shall be sold, transferred, or otherwise disposed of as prescribed, subject to the approval of the National Assembly, signified by a vote of at least 2/3 of the members of Parliament. And I'll go to 3. It says, for the purpose of this article, the major state asset includes parastatal, and equity held by government as prescribed. Yes, so I know that as you rightly pointed out, I heard the minister defending himself on Hot FM.
Yesterday.
You could feel sorry, the minister struggled, really. It was very embarrassing. The answers that were coming from there were very, very embarrassing. I don't want to talk about that.
Right.
They're insisting on it's not sold. It's not sold. Okay, but if you read the provision, it's talking about sell. It's talking about transfer. It's talking about otherwise disposed of. Okay, so it's either transfer, talking about selling, or general disposal. Now, if you look at the Constitution now, Zach, and 210, you want to find out what the intention of the framers of this Constitution was in coming up with Article 210. We have some historical background. Previously, during privatization and the post-privatization period, many citizens cried out. They cried out saying, ama company they were selling to themselves. There's been a big problem because there was no transparency and there was no accountability in the privatization process. So when Zambia badila, I am a company, mumone kundola kwali ama company, kukito kwali ama company, kwali bomba abantu, wafishtisha fye, wale ishtisha veneweka, and from there, nothing happened. So most of the problems we're experiencing today, Zach, you must understand, it's not as others would claim, thinking the problems came, from the PF, problems came from the MMD. Most of these problems came during privatization. The mishandling of the privatization process is what has landed us here. Look at how many companies we had just here in Lusaka, companies we had on the Copper Belt, countrywide. The industrialization we are trying to get back to is what we lost during privatization. This is very, very important. So people should not be economic with the truth by thinking the problem started yesterday. These problems that we face today were started as a result of privatization. And the fear people had when they were coming up with the Constitution was that if we don't put safeguards in the law, if we don't come up with constitutional provisions that will protect public assets, we will go back to the privatization period. So that background is very, very important. So people understand to say the reason why 210 is there was so that we avoid what happened during privatization. Because during privatization, we had individuals that were in charge of privatization. Those individuals ended up selling companies to themselves and ultimately emerged as very rich individuals whilst the country remained poor. So that is what that article is trying to address. That article is there to stop individuals charged with the responsibility of managing resources of the country to end up enriching themselves. That's why 210 is there. So avoiding 210, Article 210, is going back to the privatization period. Remember when I was talking about the Constitution, I said constitutions are there to impose rules on rulers and also to reduce the ruling elites to mere delegates on behalf of the Zambian people. The Constitution is there to provide constitutional safeguards on how to safeguard public resources. So what do we have today? We have individuals that are deliberately avoiding the Constitution so that they continue handling national assets in the manner that they were handled before this law came in. So there's no excuse whatsoever. We know that the transfer of that 20% shares from ZCCM-IH to First Quantum should have come to Parliament. Those transfer of shares. The dual carriageway should have come to Parliament, because you need to understand that for 25 years, the proprietary interest, the beneficial interest will be transferred to another entity. That's a public road, but it will be managed by a public entity. So that needed to come to Parliament. The Mopani deal needed to come to Parliament. So there's no excuse whatsoever The Zambian government owned shares in Mopani 100% after Glencore left. So there's been a transfer of 51%. And the constitution is very clear. It's whether a sale, a transfer, or otherwise disposal. So there's no excuse whatsoever. When we hear leaders, I mean, exactly. Let's be honest with each other here. If you look at the transaction around Mopani, it started with invitation of bids, and a number of companies tendered. They put in their bids, and I think there were two companies that were shortlisted. There was a Chinese company, and there was also a South African company, and we were waiting for results to see, who between the two will get. Then we heard there was a different company altogether, not the two that came and got the mine. So to start with, you have to admit one thing, Zach. There's been no transparency in the manner that the Mopani deal has been handled. A lot of information is coming because citizens are beginning to press for clarity and more information regarding this. You were not told, we were not even told that along the way there had been discussions between Glencore and government, and that Glencore had reduced their liability to ZCMIH from 1.5 billion to 600 million. We were not told all this information. This information is coming after this transaction. So that is the reason why transactions of this nature, Zach, should come to Parliament, because they would have asked difficult questions. One of the questions the members of Parliament had was, we had information from Mopani that they required $300 million working capital. The management of Mopani was saying all they needed was $300 million working capital. They were saying that Glencore had invested heavily in that mine. There are new shafts as it is. You're talking about a new, meaning this is a mine that was ready to start producing, and all it required was working capital. So if this transaction had been brought to Parliament, we're going to ask very difficult questions. Why are we doing this? Why don't we just find $300 million? Or why doesn't whoever it is put in $300 million in exchange for 15 or 10% shares and so on? Now, Parliament was avoided completely. You must wonder why government decided to ignore Parliament completely, to ignore the constitution provisions. Why are details or information around Mopani coming piecemeal? You're just getting it in bits. If you hear what the Minister of Mines says in the morning and you get his statement at 16 hours, they're different. It's also different from what the President will say. It's different from ZCMIH will say. Why is it like that? Because this particular transaction is shrouded in secrecy. We expect more from the UPND government, especially that it's a government that was preaching corruption when they were in opposition. Today, Zach, we have magistrates complex full every day of accused persons, accused of all manner of offenses, from building a house, owning a car, and so on, alleging that these are all proceeds of crime. So we don't expect them to handle big transactions like Mopani in this manner if there are people that are really concerned about corruption. We are also aware that corruption will come in many forms. It will even come in by way of legislation, by way of policy, administration, and so on. So it's not so much that because there's so much documentation around this transaction that there's no corruption. Other jurisdictions are not looking at corruption as a mere giving or receiving of payments, but they're looking at all actions. They cover all actions that favor private interests over and above public. So when something is done that gives an advantage to the private interests versus public interest, that should be looked at as corruption, because individuals that are charged with responsibility to govern resources of this country are acting to favor private capital, private individuals at the expense of the citizens. So as we talk about the fight against corruption, we are beginning to question decisions such as the transfer of shares in Mopani and the manner in which it was done. The example I give you is that go to the Magistrates Complex today. People who are appearing before for just building a house, or how did you build this house? Can you account for it? So the people that have gone that far cannot be the same people to handle Mopani in the manner they've handled it.
So then the citizens are asking, so what then can people who represent them like yourselves, what are you going to do about this? I mean, is this a reversible situation?
Well, first of all, at the right time, this decision will be challenged in the courts. There's no question about it. You can't let go of national assets like that. It happened before, and you'll find that they're familiar names. If you go back to the privatization times and you go through now, you'll find that you'll find some familiar names in all these transactions. So it can't be the same people punishing Zambians twice. Zambians have to begin to interrogate, and more information will continue to come. But like I said, at the right time, these decisions will definitely be challenged to the courts of law.
This is the Thursday edition of the Burning Issue on the Happy Word of 5FM Radio. Our guest is Honourable Brian Mundubile, Mporokoso Member of Parliament, and we are discussing national issues. And of course, at a later stage, I will give you, our listeners, an opportunity to call in and interact with our guest. Now, let's move to the issue of debt restructuring. The president posted this morning assuring citizens that the fact that now we've reached debt restructuring, it is the beginning of good things to come. This debt restructuring has also been, thrown at PF, and a lot of stakeholders have asked, because obviously the Minister of Finance has stated several times that you borrowed recklessly as a regime, and you had no intent of paying back in your borrowing. Let's hear your thoughts on this.
Yes, Zach. Let's start with those that are saying we borrowed recklessly. And the example that I'll start with is, for instance, ZESCO. I think ZESCO posted somewhere that they had paid a debt, I don't know, close to $1 billion. Was it kwacha dollars within 2 years? So if one says we borrowed recklessly, then we borrowed recklessly to increase power generation from 1,600 megawatts, which was our installed capacity for 50 years. And within 10 years, we improved it to about 3,500, 3,600, bringing about an additional 2,000 megawatts. So that additional 2,000 megawatts is the reason why ZESCO has had capacity to export, earn money, and be able to pay. People needed to understand what PF did with the money that they borrowed. Today, if we didn't put an extra 2,000 megawatts in power generation, I don't know what would have happened today with the current drought. So as people comment on that debt, let them remember the additional 2,000 megawatts came as a result of borrowing. ZESCO is able to export power because PF borrowed and improved power generation. ZRA is making more money at Kazungula because PF borrowed and built Kazungula Bridge. That's the reason why ZRA is meeting its targets to finance the budget. You must also understand that when the Minister of Tourism is boasting about the numbers increasing in tourist arrivals, it's because PF borrowed and built 3 international airports. So the economy is basically expanding because of that borrowing that people want to refer to as reckless borrowing. The UPND today are boasting of having employed 30,000 teachers, as it were, It was because PF borrowed and built well over 100 secondary schools, hundreds of primary schools, as it were. It was because of that borrowing that the 30,000 teachers were employed. So the people that actually created that employment, those vacancies, was the PF. The UPND just came to fulfill. There would have been no vacancy if there were no schools, as it were. The same applies to health facilities. The over 1,000 health facilities countrywide that were found were because the PF borrowed. I want to address the issue of careless borrowing.
Right.
Today, Zach, as I speak on radio, you were calling out a number of radio stations that are tuned in now.
Yeah.
They are able to listen to what I'm saying right now because of the over 2,000 communication towers that were built countrywide because of borrowing. So really, I don't think those that want to believe we borrowed carelessly are being fair. You can't talk about ZESCO repaying its debt and celebrating that, and then insulting those that made it possible for ZESCO to borrow. You can't celebrate the employment of teachers, as it were, without congratulating those that built schools where these teachers are teaching. You can't celebrate the employment of nurses without congratulating President Edgar Chagwa Lungu and the PF for having borrowed and built, health facilities countrywide. I mean, in addition to the 650 health posts, just to be clear, you're talking about over 40 district hospitals, over 40 mini hospitals. Look at Levi Mwanawasa Hospital, as it were. These all came as a result of that borrowing that people are talking about. So the employment of all these people that the EPND is relying on and celebrating is because of that borrowing. Yeah, so I think we have tackled
maybe
that.
I would want to agree with what the UPND are saying on the fact that you borrowed with no intent to pay back. Maybe I would want to believe that they could be right because of the default that you.
No. That is that's a narrow understanding of things. First of all, I'll give you a brief background about the Zambian economy. There's been talk of potential. People just talk about potential. There's potential in tourism. There's potential in agriculture. There's potential in everything. Potential in mining and so on. So what President Edgar Chagwa Lungu did, he became very courageous. President Sata and President Lungu were courageous to first of all deal with what was called backbone infrastructure. Because the development was just around the Copper Belt, Lusaka, and so on. We dealt with what would be called backbone infrastructure in a multi-sectoral integrated manner. What do I mean by that? We took communication towers countrywide. Understand? We began to expand the road infrastructure countrywide. We took power lines countrywide. What we were doing then was that we were opening up the country for investment. Instead of just relying on the mining sector, we were saying the mining sector cannot only be in northwestern and western and Copper Belt province. There are minerals countrywide. There's tourism countrywide. So if we deal with backbone infrastructure, and we're talking about power, we're talking about communication, we're talking about roads, what will happen now is that the economy will grow. So the debt that seemed so big at one time will be manageable because the economy is going to grow. It's not very different from what Honourable Sokotwane is to do. All Honourable Sokotwane is trying to do, except that he's doing it from one corner. He's only doing it from the mines, for instance, trying to give incentives to the mines so that they ramp up production. When ramp up production, we'll be able to attract enough foreign exchange to repay it. This is exactly what it was, except that our approach was wider. It was wider because we're providing infrastructure to the entire country. It would not only save the investor, but it would also save the social sectors, as it were. So today, you are able to talk about all these clinics, hospitals, communication, because we invested. So to say we had no intention to pay back is not correct. One, the economy would expand in the areas of tourism, in the areas of agriculture, in the areas of mines. By so doing, we'll earn enough foreign exchange to be able to pay that debt.
How were you going to do that when it comes to mines, when you are being alleged to have been collapsing the mine?
We were not collapsing the mines. All we wanted was to ensure we got the best from our mines. As it is now, it's just a story. We don't agree, and I continue to disagree with Comrade Musokotwane. When he gives those mining concessions, he makes mineral royalty tax deductible. We lose 6 billion kwacha per year in anticipation for some ramp up in production in the next 10 years. A promissory note, the mine saying we're going to increase to 3 million tons in 10 years. So give us these incentives. And you begin to lose this kind of money. So Zach, without this measure, we will not be having fuel costing almost 30 kwacha. Okay? It was this single measure. The single measure, the government was losing up to maybe 6 billion kwacha, between 3 and 6 billion kwacha per year. Now, what that meant is that we're not generating enough forex from the mines because of this measure that Comrade Musokotwane put up. And because we don't have enough forex, the exchange rates have gone up, inflation has gone up, fuel prices have gone up. So you can't say we're collapsing the mines. I think the trajectory that we took was that we should be able to get, it should be a win-win. We have seen mine owners boast. They get money from here to go and invest in the Panama, billions of dollars out of this country. Why? Because we've given them incentives where they can just get money and the government remains with literally nothing. So if you say we were collapsing mines, I don't agree. I think that we are at the stage where we need firm leadership. We need courageous leaders who are going to say it as it is, who are going to sit on the table and negotiate with the mines on behalf of the Zambian people. Remember, even as a minister, you're just a delegate on behalf of the Zambian people. So you should be able to tell the mine owners to say, we have to do something for the Zambians. We have to ensure that the owners of these minerals that also get the best deal out of it. And we were told by President Hakainde Hichilema when he was in opposition that he was very good at negotiations, and that when he comes in, we'll be able to see him negotiate the best deals. I ask you this question, Zach, today. Do you think he has negotiated the best deals in the mining sector?
On Mopani, yes.
Oh my goodness. What do you mean on Mopani? Yes.
I think that in the longest time we've not share held that much in an equity.
What do you mean?
49% that he says he has negotiated, as opposed to the 20% that we have always had in most of the.
No, you're starting from the other side. We had 100% in that mine. Before the IRH came in, we owned 100% in that mine. It was our mine.
Yes, it was.
Yes. So you can't.
But for you to get
you can't say by making us minority shares. By getting minority shares, you see, you negotiate the best deal. No, I don't think so. So that's what we're saying. If indeed they were good negotiators, the information that came from there was that there was so much needed in working capital. We needed an equity partner, but we didn't need partners who would come and start dictating, like they're the owners of the resource.
I think even the fact that you could get debt restructuring is an indication that there must have been a very good negotiator somewhere there.
Well, Lazard have been in business for a long time. They're behind these negotiations. Yeah. So
and let's talk about Lazard, because then there's an issue that look, you engaged Lazard as a patriotic regime to help with the debt restructuring, and it didn't work. And I had an opposition. I mean, a representative from the ruling party on this program who questioned what happened with the money that you paid Lazard, because they didn't do the job.
Well, they had limited information as they were commenting. I think they should have avoided commenting on it. Yeah, because the contract, the contract that government signed with Lazard was specific, and the contract was not terminated. Basically, the UPND government continued with the same Lazard. But remember the sentiments that were there before. The President Hakainde Hichilema said we didn't need Lazard. He said the 5 $5 million we're paying Lazard was too much, because what was needed to be paid was only $2.5 million. The excess could be used to build a clinic in his usual style. The president always talk about clinic. But today we are told the same Lazard is being paid $45 million. Okay?
So
where is the sincerity
are you indicating that Lazard is still doing the job that you, the Patriotic Front regime, contracted them to do?
There could have been variations to the contract, but the principal agreement was that they came in to assist this government to restructure data. That was why they were engaged. And they continued, and they're here up to now. What is surprising is that the fees have now gone up 9 times more. And they should have been at 2.5 million as far as the president was concerned. Because the kind of said he could do that job himself, and that Lazard should only be paid 2.5. But today it's $45 million. And
that has been paid to Lazard?
The information that we're getting. Zambians are now wondering what is really going on, Yeah. So these are some of the things that are creating a lot of anxiety amongst the citizens and the concerns. 1, there's no accountability. 2, there's no transparency. And there's no sincerity in the manner that these transactions are being carried out. Parliament is a very important institution, and I want to say as a member, the reason why we want most of these transactions to come through Parliament is that we would want to settle them once and for all. If a transaction of this nature came to Parliament, we'll have one afternoon to debate. By the following day, every Zambian will know what is going on, and there'll be no questions that will be asked. Now, you can imagine that the launch happened 2 weeks ago. Every day on radio now, there's talk about Mopani. Why? Because Zambians have come to realize there was no transparency.
What questions were you prepared to ask about this transaction?
Well, one of the questions was that there was a bid, and there were 2 companies that were shortlisted. Okay, that made it to the final. What happened to these 2 companies? At what point was this tender cancelled? Through which method did HR come in?
Yeah, so are you saying this particular company that has become an equity partner was nowhere near the 2 that were
No, they were not there. Okay, so these are some of the questions. Because you have asked me some of the questions.
Yes.
And since it was
the minister yesterday said it was, except it came late.
Yeah, when rules are changed, I've been in business of tendering for a very long time. You don't. It's very sensitive when tenders close, because at one point they closed. That's why others didn't make it to the final. 2 made it to the final, and then if it's an open tender, you really wanted to know what did this new company have over and above what the others were offering. That's transparency, Zach. These are public assets. Bring them to Parliament so that we understand. Can we help each other? Because ultimately, maybe Parliament would have resolved to say, I think the conditions this one is offering are better than the other one, and so on. Why did that not happen? Okay? So if you see the level of interest that this transaction has generated, is because Zambians are not sleeping anymore. Zambians are going to take their leaders to task. And this matter is not going to... We are happy for the people on the Copper Belt. Remember that.
That's right.
Something is happening there. But that's not the reason why we should keep quiet about how the transaction was managed. Yeah, this is very important so that going into the future, government, the few that are in government, the ruling elite should not sit believing that they can get away with anything because they're in power. We have got laws to follow. We have the Constitution to follow. There must be strict adherence to the law. And clearly you see that the UPND government has been doing so many things outside the law. You remember it was in Parliament that we questioned the appointment of private auditors to audit security wings. Something totally illegal, And we're saying, but why are you doing this? You've had tenders cancelled, hunting licenses cancelled. So we have a government that does not respect the law. So we need this government to realize that they must get back to the drawing board and know that they should not govern according to the whims and wishes of one individual, but that they must follow the law. No one is above that law. We all must follow procedure when doing things. This government doesn't do that. It's not in the habit of doing that.
Parliament also heard about the issue of the Auditor General's report, and I think there was at some point discussions around how certain important documents were not availed to the Auditor General's report, and I think that debate brought out quite a lot of things. I mean, just bring us up to speed and the listeners out there. What really transpired?
Yes, you remember that UPND government took over power and they won the elections in August, and I think the president was sworn in around September. Within the month of September, they awarded a fertilizer contract, to someone, with a very high price. The cost of fertilizer was within $1,000 per metric ton. And this contract was awarded at $1,500 per metric ton. So we raised issues. That why was this company, first of all, single-sourced and then given such a price? We later discovered there were a number of issues to do with procurement at Ministry of Agriculture. So we took interest in this. We also took interest in the cancellation of those hunting licenses. We took interest in the appointment of private auditors to audit and defense wings and so on. And so we were saying we were relying on the auditor's report, because that's when we come in as parliamentarians. We were relying on the auditor's report that would come, highlighting some of these things so that we are able to direct through the Auditor General. We are able to direct, generate a report. Individuals should be prosecuted, arrested for some of these actions. Surprisingly, what happened was that the PS, Ministry of Agriculture, just refused to surrender documents. These are documents that are supposed to be surrendered by a certain time. And there was no administrative action even against this permanent secretary. He must have been some super permanent secretary, or he was representing some very powerful people. Because imagine that even Secretary to Cabinet had no power to discipline this erring permanent secretary. So when the professional auditors, Auditor General and the team, put pressure on this individual, they were the ones that were removed from office. That was the beginning of problems. So meaning that the Auditor General's report that we are dealing with now, personally, I have no confidence in it. It's watered down, it's diluted. Okay? It was during that active audit that Dixie Chembe and his team were removed from Auditor General's office. Now,
for requesting that the PS should submit documents that were important for audit purposes.
Well, I will not specifically highlight.
But those
but
are
we know.
Yes,
we know that there were challenges in them getting information. But we also know that because they are professional in their deeds, there are certain things they included in the Auditor General's report that did not please the powers that be. Now, if the Auditor General's office in the Constitution is there as a watchdog institution, okay, to provide safeguards, okay, of managing public resources, and these particular watchdog institutions are now undermined by those that are in power, it's most unfortunate. So that's the highest level of corruption, Zach. The corruption that we are focused on is nothing. What we should be worried about is when those that are in government go and begin to undermine a constitutional safeguards like Auditor General's office, so that they don't highlight the omissions and certain things that have happened during their government. So once people are focused on talking about, no, this one built a house, he bought 3 trucks and so on, the real challenge that we have are people that are beginning to undermine institutions that are there, to protect the Zambian people. The Constitution is there. It brings about institutions so that they institutionally constrain those that are in government from doing certain things. Now, when those institutions are undermined, as it were, we have a problem. Not what to work because I am an institution of Auditor General. Is a mukulando kwebati awe apata violence chef into wino. Apa pali bukawolala. Apata pali. Number if you begin to destabilize Mwambo kula sukunshama institutions like Auditor General's office, you have very big problems. So as we examine the Auditor General's report, it's a watered down report. Okay? Who signed that report is a question. That report was signed by acting Auditor General. The acting Auditor General is an Auditor General that was appointed, and we discovered that he was above age. So you can't act in a position that you're not qualified for. So even as we are looking at that report, we are saying, okay, what is in here? Okay, we wanted to see the obvious things that we had highlighted on the floor of the House, which you thought would be captured by the Auditor General's report, are not there. So what kind of country are we running, Zach? The UPND, what they've managed to do is compromise or undermine institutions that would have contributed to good governance.
What you are saying about the Auditor General and all the happenings, it doesn't sound strange to me. It's nothing new. We saw this even under your regime. I mean, we had where, the Auditor General decides to resign because of political pressure. This political pressure has been there. It's nothing. So you can talk about it now on this government, but you did it as well under your regime.
I don't think there was anything close to what we are seeing now. During an active audit, 15 auditors are removed, including Auditor General. You never heard of anything like that. You never heard of anything like that. Okay? Because if you remember, the Dixie Chamber was Auditor General. Okay? He would produce a report. The reports that even the UPND found, okay, were produced when Dixie Chamber was Auditor General, serving under the PF. Okay? So the many things, irregularities that were pointed out when you're serving as a... So even as you talk about as political pressure, look at the Auditor General's report then and the Auditor General's report now. That will tell you a story. So the point I'm making, Zach, is that if you see people in government deliberately undermining safeguard institutions, watchdog institutions like Auditor General's office, then you're in trouble. Because then they can get away with anything, as it were. So even to sit at Parliament and begin to analyze the Auditor General's report is just a waste of time because it's been watered down. They decided what should be there and what should not be there. The real issues that should have come are not there. And how does the UPND do that? The UPND does that by weakening institutions. If you talk about Auditor General's office, they will appoint somebody who doesn't qualify to be Auditor General, to be the Auditor General. Okay, so that's already a compromise. If you talk about institutions like Electoral Commission, okay, they will appoint cadres to manage those institutions. Okay, even when it comes to the legislature, you've seen what is going on there. So in totality, when you look at the governance style of our friends in the UPND, you really feel bad when you look at this misrule. It is a misrule, yeah, because all the efforts that were made in coming up with a system for a government to function in a constitutional democracy are being undermined, are being eroded. So it's a source of concern. It's a source of concern, and that is what is creating a lot of tension around the country because people have realized that whilst the UPND were voted for, the goodwill that came from the people of Zambia, believing that they're going to have a government that is going to be professional, a government that is going to be transparent, accountable, follow the rule of law. None of these things are happening under the UPND government as we speak.
I'm about to take phone calls, but let me ask the important question. Have you succumbed to pressure and accepted that you are no longer leader of opposition?
No. That will not happen, Zach.
Are you still?
Of course.
How so? Are you recognized even?
All my members recognize me. When I go for a caucus, I walk out with all of them. I chat with them. We plan on the debate every day. We plan on questions every day. So besides not occupying the actual seat in the House, the rest of the functions are still with me. Whoever else is called leader of opposition does not even command respect for more than 4 people. If you wanted to embarrass him, just ask him to say, can you go for a caucus? And he wouldn't.
And now that you are serving a suspension, I'm sure he feels he's in your position now.
Not at all. We have a system. Honourable Kampyongo is the chief whip. So in my absence, Honourable Kampyongo, ideally, even when I'm there, Honourable Kampyongo is a whip. You know, we have distinct roles. I have a role as leader of opposition. He has a role as a whip, and Honourable Cassandra deputizes him. So the three offices are fully functional.
Do you talk?
We function every day.
Do you talk?
We speak
with
every
your faction?
Which one?
With the leader of opposition, the faction, the Mao Sampa faction leader of opposition. Do you talk?
There's no leader of opposition. Comrade Chavinga is a suspended member of the PF. That's how I know him. So why not? I mean, we're parliamentarians. I speak to him. I know that he's misguided, but I take him to be a suspended member of the PF. That's all.
My guest this morning is Honourable Brian Mundubile. He is Mporokoso Member of Parliament. And of course, we will start taking calls now on 0955-221515. We've got comments on Facebook as well. We would like to sincerely apologize. We had a break in transmission for Lusaka listeners only. We had a power failure at the transmission point. We're back now, and that was simply for about 5 minutes. But sincere apologies for that. But here we are. The number that you're calling us on is 0955-221515. And also remember, you can send us your message on 0761-912493. We've got a caller here. Good morning. Nasebenza bwino muli bwanje?
Honourable, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Muli bwanje?
Mr. Piri.
Yeah, exactly.
Please be brief, Mr. Piri.
Yeah, you know about Honourable Kamba. You know, this country now, it is dead. If we can look at the parliament which we have, it is not the parliament what we know. The Speaker of the National Assembly, Neri Muti, and his vice, they have destroyed. These people, they don't understand why you are there. You see, we, the people of Zambia, we are the one who are sending these MPs to present us. But unfortunately, when you see the activities, what is happening in Parliament, it is a sorry sign. There is no way somebody who knows that these matters are in court, then you come and steer ahead that this is the data which are coming out from the other faction, which is it is very unfortunate. You know, let the Speaker of the National Assembly respect the opposition. Let them respect the views which are coming out from the opposition. That's why in this parliament today, when you listen, it has become so irrelevant. Everything which we know that it can be take place in this parliament which we have has been damaged and destroyed. You see? Look, when we talk about the cases, when you hear from the JJ Bandas, when you hear from Nia Zulus, those suspended, the Mambirima member of parliament, I'm sure all those issues, they are denting themselves. Instead of making the house in order, themselves they are thinking that they are so powerful. They're just destroying themselves. Let me talk about debt restructuring. I'm sure debt restructuring, let the government explain to us, and they should not say that the PF Vanakongola, but they have a Zondarama, put you another plan, Yostana Zondarama. I'm disagreeing with the government. When President Akainde went there at Kazungura Bridge, he told the public that here's the money which I'm collecting, billions of dollars. Those money should be taken into account to control 99 to pay the debt. When you are talking about this so-called exporting of the power, the Patriotic plant invested so much in infrastructure development in electricity. Look at the government today is exporting our power, is giving us load shedding. So those money which are exporting our power through the infrastructure which was built by the PS, the government at least they can pay back the debt. Today the Patriotic plant they built about this so-called storage. The government is collecting huge sums of money per day, and that money is going to control
Mr. Piri, Mr. Piri, we have to end here. Thank you very much for calling. Let me take some more calls on 0955 221515. That's the number you're calling us on. For your messages, please send them to 0761 912493. Good morning.
Hello, good morning, Uncle Zach.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. Good morning,
your name and where you're calling us from?
Good morning to you.
This is Senior calling from Liwala 17.
The name again?
Nadishua, Senior.
Nadishua. Please go ahead and be brief.
Yes, I think Honourable there in the studio, the way you're articulating things, we need to be very sincere. As we speak now, the same parliament has recognized the Mao Sampa-led faction as the ultimate leaders of the PF, and Sampa is the president. Honourable Chavinga is the leader of the opposition. Because there's no way you can tell me, Honourable, that someone can resign to say, I have retired in politics. Then tomorrow again he changes and he comes and he says, no, I'm still the leader of PF. President Edgar Chagwalungu resigned, say, I've left politics. But later, after he seen that Mao Sampa has taken over the PF party, he comes and he says, I'm still the PF party. I think, Honourable, you need to resolve these wrangles, internal wrangles in PF, so that we're able to see a viable opposition political party. Than now hearing that all the PF people want to go into Ukwa party. And they have to bring back the leadership which the Zambian people rejected. As we speak now, Honourable, even the issue of debt restructuring, the PF failed to do it under Lazar. Even Antonio Maza said it can't be done in this one. It's very difficult to do this program. But Eket and his team said we are going to manage and do this. Today we are speaking. It has managed. Look, Honourable, is it the other mine where you had put a liquidator? You didn't come to Zambian people and tell them to say, this is how much we have been collecting from this mine when it was under a liquidator. We don't know how much you are getting, Honourable, or how much Zambian lost. But here today you are saying that no, because the agent is on the city and you want to blame everything on ATH. We should recommend the PF government under you, Honourable. You removed the new allowance. But today, as we speak, President Hakainde Hichilema and his team, they have brought back the new allowances. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for calling. Let me take a few messages. Got one here. Zach, ask him why he, as the Patriotic Front, failed to pay all marketing companies as per Auditor General's report. This is the fuel they were selling at 17 kwacha per litre. This is KM from within Lusaka. And let's see if we can get another one. Mr. Zach, good morning. And I am Mr. Banda from Chainda Compound, to be specific. And well, I'm from Chainda Compound, to be specific. And indeed, good morning, the guest. You are speaking very well. Now, let me talk about the debt restructuring, which the World Bank has now advised this government to slow down in their appetite for celebrating things that are in its infancy, all right, without even educating the people on what it means to restructure for the future generations to pay. Is it normal? This UPND government came with flamboyant promises voluntarily, and Zambians are kneeling, waiting, but nothing is coming. So let me also give you some Facebook page comments. A couple of them are just comments. Honourable Brian Mundubile, really you are a representative of the people and continue being the voice of the people. That's from Terry Banda. Luis Kampamba says, watching from Chubombo, well-spoken, Honourable. Pride Ngosa says, Honourable Mundubile, we love you. Keep on fighting for us. UPND means nothing to us, people of Zambia. Then Stovey says, well spoken Mundubile Fialungule Fintu. Let's respond to especially those two callers. I think they had critical questions.
Yes, Mr. Chukwawe Piri joins the many voices that feel that Parliament has to really look at how it's operating so that it can regain the confidence from the people. A number of Zambians take a lot of time to listen to what Parliament has to say and the deliberations in Parliament. And obviously his comments are just joining the many calls that have come that it's high time that Parliament did an introspection so that we can begin to see a dignified Parliament, a Parliament that is functional. It should just not be statistics that we have a Parliament. It should be a Parliament that is functional, a Parliament that should save the Zambian people, a Parliament that should stand in the gap, a Parliament that should provide proper checks and balances to the government in power, a Parliament that should ask the difficult questions. Yeah, but when you have committee chairpersons coming from the ruling party, it's not heard of. There is no jurisdiction that we visited as parliamentarians where we found members of the ruling party chairing committees. This is the first parliament in the world where you find members of the ruling elite leading accountability committees to provide checks and balances unto themselves. Those are the weaknesses that you're finding in these committees. In many cases, many places where we've been, the chairperson of the Public Accounts Committee should actually come from the largest opposition party, because that is, they are coming in with alternative policy. They are coming in to question why certain things are done. But obviously, we have abridged processes, we have abbreviated processes, so that the committee system is completely killed in our parliament, because we have a government in place that does not want to be transparent. A government that does not want to follow procedure. A government that does not want to follow the law. Bonali sure the issue of Mao Sampa and Chavinga, we will not comment because it's in court. Bonali sure was very emotional. I don't know why he doesn't like Uka. Bonali sure may be the only Zambian who doesn't like Uka. But I think with time, Bonali sure will be seen embracing Uka. And, so he talks about KCM, that why were you not telling us what was going on? Article 210 in this particular case relates to Mopani. Article 210 does not relate to the circumstances at KCM at the time. So there was no requirement at the time, for that level of disclosure. That is the reason why you're not getting the report. You jump to talk about meal allowances. Meal allowances are good, but you needed to understand the wisdom at the time. There were only so many universities or so many students that were receiving meal allowances. But as a result of the measure that was taken then, there were a number of students that got bursaries instead. And of course, the meal allowances are back. There's nothing wrong. What would want to encourage government is to do more, because when you're catering for students, it should not only be for a limited number. You must be able to cater for students right across. And that's when, you can get all the students celebrating the meal allowances. The issue of debt restructuring, of course, you had asked that question earlier. And the caller was saying that there's been premature celebrations. Yeah, my take is on debt restructuring. I want to say this to the Zambian people, first of all. When the UPND came into power, in 2021, there were a number of calls, coming to government. And the government was saying, look, we're unable to do things because we're implementing a PF budget. Wait for our budget. So the Zambian people waited. In 2022, they began to implement their budget. So the Zambians came again and said, now, when are you doing this? I said, no. Wait for the IMF. When the IMF is done, then we'll be able to sort out things. So when the IMF deal was signed, Zambians called them on them again. So they said, no. We're now waiting for debt restructuring. So debt restructuring, one afternoon, I think the president was coming from France. Civil servants were lined up at the airport and everybody was celebrating. Debt restructuring is done. So this celebration we're having now is the second wave of celebration on debt restructuring. I hope we won't have the third. I hope this is the last one. But the point that I want to make is that the UPND government is in the habit of exciting citizens for nothing most of the times. I had a very candid discussion with the president, with Honourable Mporokoso on debt restructuring. That was sometime last year when he was coming to make the first ministerial statement to Parliament. I had a chat with him. I said, Honourable Minister, debt restructuring is important for the country. I want us to agree, as you being in government and us being in the opposition. Today you are coming to deliver a ministerial statement on debt restructuring. I want you to be very sincere to the Zambian people. Don't excite them unnecessarily. You should project views that are factual regarding this. And when he came, he was very sober. He delivered a very straightforward ministerial statement. So what I'm trying to say here is that Zambians, even as we celebrate debt restructuring, it is good. Many people have actually misunderstood it. They want to believe that with debt restructuring, by June, Millie will now be 50 kwacha, because that's what the UPND promised. I had farmers calling me to say, Mundubile number chawama if debt restructuring, kanji fertilizer ala wapa 250. Nkwaini chawama ukaina fuel number, I'm sure ikafika kama 12 kwacha per liter. You understand? So that these perceptions people have on debt restructuring, and the UPND normally play this game just for some temporal comfort. They are performing very poorly on all fronts in almost every sector. So when they pick up some piece of good news, they want to project it just to help them, feel comfortable in the meantime. So right now, because of their failures on exchange rates, milk prices, fuel prices, infrastructure, and many other things, they have no good news. So they feel by projecting a certain image around debt restructuring, it will give them some room, to just feel comfortable. But I want to advise them that let them be very clear to the Zambian people that yes, debt restructuring is good. The impacts in the immediate future will not really change the circumstances as they are now. Because, Zach, look at it this way. From 2020, since we defaulted, we have never repaid debt. So there's been no payment from the Ministry of Finance or from the Bank of Zambia towards debt repayment. Meaning, the signs of the economy, where we are now as an economy, is the best case scenario. When the debt is restructured, because now we even start paying some small amount towards debt repayment, meaning that we will not be in the position where we are now. Yes, it will give government some room to borrow, as it were, but Zambians must be told the truth as to what they expect once the debt has been fully restructured. So as to whether it's done or not is immaterial. It will be done. But they must be able to project the actual position of what will happen to an average household once the debt is restructured. So they have an opportunity. They made so many promises which have not been fulfilled. And now they have an opportunity to be able to restate or rebase their promises. Tell the Zambian people, okay, with debt restructuring, because you've been giving excuses about the debt mountain. So when this debt mountain has been dismantled or sprayed across, this long period of time, what do we expect? That is the discussion that we should be having. Not just asking civil servants and everybody to be clapping debt restructuring. What is it that is in debt restructuring? What should an average Zambian expect? The marketeer who's been chased from the street when the debt has been restructured. Finshi ba marketeer wabaleta mpyamusi wala kwatako. Ababalumendo bashikwete nchito. Nga kwa debt restructuring yaba infu. Finshi fiala abako. Bali aba imise pela shirefo kuma maini chila bushiku dying mumigodi mulia. Nga yaba restructured debt. Finshi fiala chitika. Balaba civil servant balonga ku cabinet office abali 400 for nothing, for having done no wrong. Finish fika chitika with debt restructuring. So let's get all these problems and bounce them off debt restructuring to understand what is going to happen. Yeah.
And the president has done justice to that. I mean, in his posting today, this morning on Facebook, he says, never again must we find ourselves in a crisis in such a crisis where debt levels became so unsustainable that they burden our treasury and hinder our ability to serve our citizens effectively. Now, this government, he says, will not tolerate such circumstances, neither will it tolerate corruption or the theft of public resources.
Don't believe any of that, Zach. Don't believe any of that. It's actually annoying.
It's assurance enough.
No, it's very annoying. Don't believe any of that. Okay? Because the president told us. The president told us that he was telling Costa, when we come into power, we will not borrow. There is even no room to borrow. We have to change the paradigm. It should be a paradigm shift. Do you remember that discussion?
Yes, I do.
So ask them today how much they've borrowed. Ask them today how much they've borrowed. Okay? So when the president says that, don't believe it. Because he promised that he wasn't going to borrow. How much have they borrowed today? At the rate they are going, they will borrow more money in 5 years than PF borrowed in 10 years. The UPND government, I want to repeat, at the rate the UPND is going, they will borrow more money in 5 years than the PF did in 10 years. The UPND were simply good at propaganda. They painted the PF black. Look, the PF as a government is 100% better than the UPND have demonstrated so far. In areas of corruption, maladministration, not following the rule of law, on all fronts, I can confirm that. How is the president telling us today, talking about corruption and theft, in view of what has happened with the dual carriageway? The president should not talk about corruption and the theft of public resources, as long as that deal for the dual carriageway remains the same. If the deal that happened, what happened at First Quantum, the transfer of that 20% shares, if it remains like that, the president should not make that statement. The president should refrain from making such a statement with the Mopani deal still in effect. Are we together? The procurement of fertilizers still going on. The president should not make that statement. For once, I want to appeal to His Excellency the President. The Zambians are not who they were 20 years ago. Zambians are alert now. Zambians read. Zambians can see through things. Today's corruption, Zach, is happening through administration, legislation, and policy. That's what's happening. If you interrogate the decisions that are being made in the mining sector today, the giving of those tax concessions, are they done in the best interest of the people? If corruption covers all actions that favor private interest over and above public interest and done through administration, legislation, and policy, then what is the test for corruption, Zach? Maybe let's start from there. All you have to do to test whether there's been corruption in any, under that new definition, the broadened definition of corruption, all you have to find out is that, was this in the interest of the Zambian people? The decisions that were made in favor of the mines were not in the interest of the Zambian people. It was in the interest of the mining houses, friends of the ruling elite. So it was not done in the interest of the Zambian people. Therefore, you can see corruption in it. Okay? So when you see the transactions surrounding Mopani, it's shrouded with a lot of dark areas. Yes, our people need jobs in Mopani, but we have to do everything within the law. Was that transaction done within the law? No. Take the dual carriageway, for instance. The dual carriageway is like, as usual, the UPND come with a bang. They come with good news. Good news. Instead of $1 billion, we're going to do it within $650 million. Zach, this money is coming from NAPSA and Wakeman's compensation, you understand, to pay the contractor to do the road. The question that begs is that when the contractor has been paid the $650 million, what is their further interest in the road? What is the further interest in the road? Why is it not NAPSA or Wakeman's compensation remain with an interest on that road? Or how can somebody come to your house, Zach, borrow money from your son and build you a house at 5 times the price? Okay? Why? So those are questions that we must ask. So for as long as we have deals like that, let's not talk, the president should not make those statements. The corruption under the UPND is so high. It's unbelievable. in terms of figures, in terms and we'll be coming back to these radio stations. We are busy compiling that information. So when His Excellency makes statements like that, it's very, very disturbing. So the point I was trying to make, first of all, is that around all this debt restructuring, let the Zambians be told the truth as to what will be the impacts. Don't let Zambians celebrate and then there's nothing to it. Okay? Let's put a stop. We want to call upon this government to begin to operate in a transparent manner. They should be able to provide information. Almost all procurement under the UPND government is either single sourcing or limited bidding. And yet when you go to the law, there are circumstances when you can single source. So for the UPND, any procurement is agent. They create an environment where there must be some agent procurement, emergency procurement, so that the single source. Now, so when the president is talking about corruption and not stealing, no. Examine the procurement under the UPND government. Almost all procurement is single sourcing or limited bidding. Now find out who's been shortlisted for that procurement. They're all familiar names. And how does the president talk like that? How does the president start talking about no corruption, no? When we know that the procurement is limited bidding and single sourcing all the time under the UPND. It's not fair. Let's protect the resources for the Zambian people. Your Excellency the President, I'm appealing to you as your brother. It's high time you began to govern this country according to the law. Please govern this country following procedure, especially in the areas of procurement. Your Excellency, the values and principles under Article 8 of this Constitution talks about integrity. And integrity can be said to be our actions, what we do when nobody's looking. Is our conscience clear? Is the conscience of this government clear? When they examine their activities in the past 2.5 years, are the activities clear in the areas of procurement? Are the activities clear in the areas of electoral practices? Today, you have policemen going to arrest councillors just before they vote. When we talk about integrity, I want to appeal to each and every one of the ministers in the UPND government, including the president. Examine yourselves when nobody's looking. Are you sure this is what the Zambian people expected? Is this what the Zambian people expected? Today, because all the time you've been having what by-elections, the Minister of Sport, the Minister of Commerce have been going with bags of money from their ministries in the name of empowerment. That's how we've been robbing those elections. Now you have closed-door elections, deputy mayor positions, where you can't have that influence, and you are losing everywhere. You had to go and start arresting councillors for that matter. Is that the kind of governance that we need today, in this day and age, Mr. President? You are saying you're in the Champions League and you're doing things methodically. Is that the methodical way of conducting elections? The best, my advice to you, Excellency, the President, is that allow free and fair elections so that you as a government and as a party can look at yourselves in the mirror. You begin to have the correct image of how the Zambian people are viewing you. If you have to make amends and corrections, you can then make them because you'll have a correct position of where you stand. To want to hide behind these machinations, using the police, arrest the councillor so that we win these positions will not help you in any way. Well, the Zambian people are watching. The issue of corruption, take an introspection. Begin to examine these transactions one by one. We've highlighted these examples. These are things that Zambians are talking about out there on the street.
Let me take another set of calls. Good morning. Please tell us your name and where you're calling us from.
Yeah, this is Philemon from Chitulika, Zambia.
Philemon, you've got a minute. Stick to it.
Thank you. Allow me to disagree with your guest who has continuously offloading falsehood misinformation. Indeed, he's talking about judiciary. You know, this there was the issue of the petition. Was the petition heard? Nothing. How many cases did UPND won when they were in opposition? This time during my opposition, you were able to win cases. under the judiciary, you are able to win a lot of cases. The current government is losing the cases, which means the judiciary this time is enjoying autonomy. There is independence, unlike the previous regime of yours. So you should give kudos to entire judiciary for the work they are doing. What is the problem I've seen here is you wanted Mr. Barry to maintain all the people, including the GPP and the rest who belong to Patriotic Front. The problem here is the changes that he made, so it cannot happen. It cannot happen. Coming to this.
Unfortunately, your time is up, Philemon. Unfortunately, thank you very much. Right, we'll take two more quick calls, brief calls for that matter, on 0955 221515. Good morning. Please tell me your name and where you're calling us from, and you've got a minute.
Hello, Zach.
Yes, please.
Hello, Zach. Zach, wemwana wandulisha.
Ndife bwino barishamkwe.
Iyo bwino neshukuru Michael.
Bashukuru Michael. Batumina kuisa mkwe.
Muno mwine mulusaka wemwana wandi ku 6 miles kongwelele.
Twatasha bashukuru pa kutumai mkwe.
Honourable Andy Mulishani, I love you so much, Mundubile.
Ashukuru Michael Mulishani, Mulife bwino shukuru.
But no, ndi mulwele, and tomorrow I'll be going to Friday my role chelo ku Unilab mu road park at Sababa Road.
You are alat mafoni chilumendo. Alamit phone mulumendo.
Because in the ronka ku internal kind city scanning.
Okay.
Ile abamwa at Sababa kuchira pa CBF.
Oh, iramala ndile po mkwa iwash Michael.
Nka ku city scanning, so now I'm I'll be going there tomorrow morning by 8 hours. So I'm so lucky to talk to you. When you come, you stop from there. We need to talk.
Na lami tumeshukuru.
Na papa tasan. Elio ukwisa kuria shi indela ndazak.
Mkwa bashukuru.
Wemwana wandi zak. Awala iche ba mu UPND like avena ceremony bala for obunga. That's why they support everything wrong things all the time. Bantu they are there bakora kyobunga kuri akainde ikirema. And bare tumala lokula support ekintufya. Bare labakuta zabukoto relatives all over the country. They are suffering. Ubu teko zak. Amakuluku ayene naye akutinga kwaisa my elections. Bare ikataba nabo. Ukutila bena bapite. Is that normal kwena? Bantu muntu wose mu Zambia they are aware about the tricks. They are aware about it because it's a right running like this. Every sector of the government, every institution of this government, not by it's a compromise. This is it by it's a compromise. Judicially, legislature, everywhere, parliament. Takuri chisumecho abantu barekabira mu kino kyalo kabiri bera bepara abantu bukiyo. Well articulation issues ba Mundubile. Well done. Bare mupera suspension tata wandi bare mupera kyamafuta and you are becoming more popular ikaramba sana ba Mundubile. Suspension ba mupereyo umupanga popular than ever before.
Na totera bashukuru Mike.
Uriana maya ba parliament. Na ponga bishi bapangana na kainde katwishi. Because ina ite banyafe muri kino kyalo.
Twatasha bashukuru.
Kwa speaker o aba musangori ayo. Kino kyalo nacho na ikakuri akainde ikirema. Abama press fingers yabo mwira bakonkera yo. Bala baforesha obunga everywhere.
Tekumi katapaka no ashukuru na titafa kashitaba na totera mkwai.
We mwana wandi zake mule bombo mutende but ile ndi mulwele newe so.
Mopole
I need to talk to the Honourable when he elected there.
Thank you. Thank you, Shukuru.
Thank you.
Right. Let me take one more on 0955 221515. That's the number you're calling us on. Our guest is Honourable Brian Mundubile, Mporokoso Member of Parliament. And we would like to obviously get one more call. But then since that is not coming, Honourable, let's begin to conclude. Now, what is happening with you now that you are suspended from Parliament? I mean, what is your life like as a Member of Parliament while you're serving your suspension?
Well, of course, I continue to serve the people of Mporokoso. Even was on suspension, I I'm in touch with the constituency. I'll be going there in a few days. I'll spend a lot of time in the constituency to continue doing the community work. But of course, even being on this radio program, I'm saving the people of Zambia. Because if we don't appear on these programs, then they'll believe what the president is saying in that post. They'll actually believe that there's sincerity. They believe that the president means well. My job as a people's representative is to expose lies as they are and also be able to advise government. Like I've done now, I'm saying to the president that let them do an introspection. Let them be sincere. Forget about going on Twitter and don't post anything. Just sit alone and say, how have I performed? The president should ask himself these questions. Me as President Hakainde Hichilema, in the area of corruption, how clear or sincere have I been? In the area of abuse of office, have I been sincere? That's integrity. When you talk about values and principles, you should be able to sit sometimes alone. Don't go to the media, don't go to social media, and ask yourself these questions. And come up with your own checklist and be able to mark yourself, score yourself, give your own scoreboard. How are you faring? Because you can't lie to yourself, Zach. Huh? You can't lie to yourself. You will be able to notice, okay, here we were compromised. Here we did shortcuts. Here I favored this one. And why that is important is that President Hakainde Hichilema was very critical. He called everybody corrupt. I'll come to this program, Zach, one of these fine days, in terms of values. You remember that during our time, there was a popular 41 fire tenders, 42 or 41, 42?
42, yes.
And a few ambulances and so on. Maybe 3 issues that they carried for 5 years. We want to come with a list of corrupt transactions and the values under the UPND government. Zambians are going to collapse. Yeah. So we expect nothing but sincerity from our government. We want our government to be honest. One, President Hakainde Hichilema do everything possible to protect the democracy of this country. I was old enough in 1990, 1991 when we fought for this democracy. I remember what we went through to fight for this democracy. And that is sometimes why you find that we take it very hard to protect this democracy, because I was there. Of course, we have a few young people that joined along the way. But when we're moving from one party state to multi-party state, I was there. And I was old enough and participated in that process. And they appeal to President Hakainde Hichilema, do everything possible to ensure that you don't damage this democracy. Secondly, the rule of law. You came out as a person that was going to respect the constitutionalism. It has turned out to be the exact opposite. There's enough time, Your Excellency the President, to make amends, to change your course and begin to follow the law. Yeah, because, these positions that we have are temporal. Today are there, tomorrow you may not be there. So there's no need, it's not important, it's not necessary to begin to commit crimes and offenses now against, the state. Things that you can just do properly. So look at the areas of procurement. Zambians are following very keenly. And most importantly, look at the unity of this country, Your Excellency the President. There are people that are sitting today at cabinet office, okay? And if I could quickly, look at this, Zach, okay? You have certain offices that were deliberately put there. If you look at the Office of the Public Protector is supposed to protect some of those offices. If you go to Article 173, Values and Principles, it says the guiding values and principles of the public service include the following. Okay, no, go to 2. We say the values and principles specified in 1 apply to service. So if you've been removed from office, reduced in rank, or otherwise punished without just cause or due process. Article 173 Article 3D says a public officer shall not be removed from office, reduced in rank, or otherwise punished without just cause and due process. The 400 people plus that are sitting at cabinet office were just removed without due process, without any reason, and dumped there. And when you go to the public protector, who is supposed to properly take up these issues, and cases. They have no power because the current government is intolerant. It has paralyzed government institutions. The public protector is remembering what happened to the DPP, what has happened to registrar of societies. So they are immobilized. They just sit there and watch, because if they acted on this particular case, maybe they'll not be in office tomorrow. So these are the questions we're asking to the president. Is this the kind of government that you want to run? Honestly speaking, and you say you're doing well. Those civil servants at cabinet office are men and women that provided patriotic and dedicated service to this republic. Straight from school, some of them served for 20 years, 25 years straight from university. This is the only thing they've known. How do you punish them because they worked so hard under the previous regime? Why don't you congratulate them and say, because you worked hard, the previous government was able to achieve road infrastructure, was able to do airports, was able to do bridges, was able to do dams, was able to do communication towers and so on. Because the government that they saved performed. And the reason why you're having most of these challenges, even in parastatals act, is that there's no experienced manpower. The manpower that is able to carry the institutional memory is packed at cabinet office. Government is having problems now to do things because they've packed the experienced civil servants at government office. And yet that is against the law. Article 173, 3D is saying you can't, you shall not be removed like that. So when we are saying, in many cases, the actions by the current government and the president are in breach of the constitution, we mean just that. So I want to appeal to the public protector. Can you immediately move in and look at the plight of these Zambians that are sitting at cabinet office doing nothing? In fact, they're not even sitting in cabinet office, they're in their homes. When they go to cabinet office, they're told, go home, or we'll let you know when you should come.
Your quick comment on the seizure of Investors Bank due to insolvency.
Well, I'm yet to read up on it, but my quick comment will be that it's a sign of a bad economy. You know that chain stores are closing now. Quite a number have closed now. So it's not coming as a surprise, yeah, because if their liquidity or the working capital was very tight, you don't expect them to survive. When banks begin to collapse in an economy, it's a very bad sign. Okay, I would not want to say much, but these are early signs of a bad economy.
I understand. Honourable, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Zach. It's been a pleasure. Like I said, we want to come back to this program, specifically talk about corruption, because I haven't taken that post very well, where the president
spots this morning.
Yes, he's talking about corruption and so on. I think we need to come and now expose the detail. We need to come and talk about corruption. We need to highlight transaction by transaction with the accompanying figures, so that people know
why are you not reporting those cases? Why are you not reporting those cases to the anti-corruption or relevant authority?
You know why. We are being very careful. When you're dealing with a compromised system, you see, when the very institutions, the safeguards, the watchdog institutions are undermined, and you want to go with those cases there, and how many cases
you have no confidence in them?
How many cases have been reported there, and nothing has been done? Okay, Imano Mwamba, I remember Kasonde Mwenda, they've been there to report. Kasonde Mwenda went with the entire pamphlet of what has been done, who's been caught. They would rather call somebody who built a house around the corner than the real corruption, because what they want is to try and paint the other regime corrupt. But we'll bring the figures. I think the starting point is for the public to know, and then the cases that have been reported by others can be acted upon.
Thanks once again for coming, Honourable.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure to have you. And thank you very much to our listeners as well. Thank you for having followed our conversation. And more so, appreciation goes to our partner radio stations, Tuta FM, Machinga Radio, iWave FM, Spice FM, and of course, Wave FM for carrying this program live. We'll definitely be back next week at the same time with yet another episode of The Burning Issue. From us always, take care of yourselves and more so of each other. Bye-bye.
Tune in next week for another edition of The Burning Issue, and thank you